Hi there, folks. It's Jamie Good here on SipGlocal, introducing episode 2 of Wine Zones, and we are we have a really interesting lineup tonight. We're going to be talking about Cabernet Sauvignon, and I have two guests that I think are going to be fantastic. We've got Elaine Brown, who most of you probably know already. She's a very well established wine writer based in California. Super smart, and it's going to be really fun. And also Sarah Goedhart, who is the winemaker for Hedges in Red Mountain, one of the Grand Crus of Washington State. So that's what we're going to be doing. And first of all, I'm going to plug Marshall into the conversation because he's going to introduce the concept of SipGlocal.
Hey, Jamie, how you doing?
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
Good. Well, this is Doug Marshall here with Washington State Wine and SipGlocal. We're so excited to kick off Wine Zones episode 2. It's going to be a great show today. We literally have been just getting on and off of these phone calls with you, Sarah, and Elaine, and some really fun stuff has definitely come up. Can't wait for this discussion about Cabernet Sauvignon. We're going to go all over the world with you guys. What do you think? What are some of the, I guess, key things that you're looking forward to chatting about here today, Jamie?
Well, I think look, I'm kind of geeky, and I love the geeky talk, so I think that'd be quite fun. And I know that Elaine and Sarah can geek out as well. But kind of it would be nice to get to the sort of some of the bones of Cabernet. Just getting under the bonnet and discussing some of the issues. The meaty issues. But also, it'd be really interesting to just share some of our experiences from traveling around the world tasting Cabernet, about some of the Cabernets that have impressed us and why they've impressed us.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think it would be lovely to hear from some of the people tuning in about some of their favorite Cabernets and why they like them as well. And if they've got any questions, we'd love to have a really nice conversation, discussing these issues.
Yeah, definitely. So, and that's absolutely right. We want to make sure that we're answering people's questions. We've got a good show for you here today. Make sure you're tossing questions into the comment box, and we'll jump to that. Before I hop off, because really this is about you, this is about Elaine, and this is about Sarah. Nobody wants to sit up here and listen to me talk about SipGlocal, but it is an important thing, and we're really excited to launch this with you, Jamie. For those of you who aren't already following SipGlocal, definitely hop on, take a look and see what we're doing. It's about a movement that's bigger than one region, one industry, anything really. We're trying to band together to support local industry, support local regions, support local restaurants. And so whatever you're doing to support locally, we're doing that on a global scale, and that's what SipGlocal is. It's a mouthpiece, it's a voice for all of those who are looking for that kind of support and who want to support others. So with that being said, I'm going to leave it short. Go check out SipGlocal. We've got great stuff going on. We want to get you involved. Jamie, have an amazing time today. I can't wait to watch.
Thanks,
and let's get this thing on the road as you will, okay?
Great, super.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and log off here, and we'll send Elaine right in. Cheers.
Okay, great. So now I'm waiting for Elaine to join. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Elaine and I have been on panels before, most recently at TechSom, and we had a cracking time. It was just a really interesting conversation. It was it just kind of worked kind of organically, naturally, and it had an energy to it, which I think is what you really want in these sorts of things. Because the first rule is do not bore the audience, and I hope that as we're discussing today, that we won't bore you. So I'm waiting for Elaine to request to join. Just scrolling through, just trying to see. No, not yet. No. So scrolling down to the bottom of all these, it's so good to see all these people here. Oh, yes, I've seen something from Elaine. Where's it gone? She definitely requested, I definitely saw it. Sorry about this dead air. That's really bad, isn't it? Yeah, I'm just trying to find. She did request. There it is. There it is. So I think we've almost there. We almost got Elaine. Yes, we've got Elaine.
Yay!
Sorry, Elaine. It's my fault. What happened is I started scrolling up to see what you requested earlier, and then it opened a conversation dialog box, and I was trying to, you know, it's like when your finger,
Yeah,
trying
no,
to
it's
get
a
rid of the
nightmare.
conversation dialog box, and then be able to scroll down. And then when I scrolled down,
Yeah.
I saw you, and it's like, but you know, it's just that's the way it is with these things. But it's really good to see you. How are you
I
doing?
have to say, it's really good to see you too.
Yeah, how's things?
Yeah, it's okay. You know, the moods come and go. The
Yeah,
feelings ebb and flow. We have everything we need though.
yeah,
And my daughter Rachel, my 20-year-old daughter, she's here, and that's, you know, a lot of last year she was working internationally in very remote parts of the world. So it's good happenstance that it just by chance it turned out she was here when we realized we had to stay put. So that's a relief, you know.
yeah, yeah. No, it's and what's you know what's it like where you are? Obviously you're in the midst of a wine community.
Yeah.
And there's a strong hospitality scene there as well. Is everything shut down completely?
Yeah, everything's shut down. You can get food to go. And
Mhm.
one of the really cool things, you know, I was saying to Doug yesterday, I really appreciate what SipGlocal's doing. Like anything we can do to encourage community involvement, I think is so valuable. And just the idea that that the Wine Zones program with SipGlocal is trying to get across about, you know, act locally, think globally, basically, it's just such an encouraging thing, a great way to help people feel like they can be part of a community. So one of the main places I hang out here is a little place in Napa Compline. I'm in Sonoma, but town of Napa is only 20 minutes from my house. You know, everything's relatively close here. And Compline is a place I hang out regularly, and they've been shut down now for almost a month, which is hard thing to navigate. But what they've actually been doing is accepting sponsorships to feed healthcare workers and other types of first responders. And so they've actually been able to deliver more than almost 4,000 meals since all this started to people in the region who are doing healthcare work and also safety work through the county. So that's pretty cool. And so a couple weeks ago, actually, my daughter, she doesn't have any income right now, but she gave me $100 and asked if I could donate it to what Compline's doing, and so she could feed some healthcare workers, which is really cool. And then they're also still able to give takeout. So I went and picked up some burgers and gave them money for feeding healthcare workers too, which I think it's a great initiative.
No, that's really cool. Yeah. So to Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah.
Last week we discussed Syrah. Syrah is like kind of cool. Cabernet Sauvignon. I mean, it's interesting because in Washington State, it's by far the biggest grape variety. I did looked at some figures. There's 7,500 hectares have been in Washington State, as opposed to 3,700 Merlot, 1,800 Syrah. The biggest white variety is Chardonnay, just on about 3,000 hectares. So Cabernet Sauvignon is a big deal, and it's a big deal in California as well, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually second most planted. I don't have the numbers, but Cabernet's second most planted here. Chardonnay's first. They've danced back and forth a little bit, but generally Chardonnay's been in the lead, closely followed by Cabernet. If you dial down into specific regions, the order there will flip, but in the state as a whole, Chardonnay and Cabernet are the most planted.
And what do you think? I mean, obviously Napa is one of the regions where Cabernet is absolutely it's almost like synonymous with Napa. Napa and Cabernet, the words go together. What do you think the reason for the success of Cabernet and Napa is? Is it the quality of the wines, or is there something else there?
I think it's a combination of factors. I mean, the truth is Cabernet did not become the most planted variety in Napa Valley until the end of the 90s, which I think is a really interesting thing to point out. Actually, prior to that, Zinfandel and Petit Syrah were more widely planted, but also Napa Valley was profoundly diverse in its plantings. There used to be quite a lot of Chenin Blanc and even Riesling all up and down the valley. And there even was still a small amount of Mission still, you know, our first variety still
Really?
through Napa. Yeah. But then, AXR1 created a second phylloxera crisis that we realized was going on in the 80s, but then vines can usually hold on a little bit. So the great replanting of Napa Valley happened in '96, and at that point, everybody flipped to Cabernet, and it became the most planted variety in Napa Valley then. But the other thing to keep in mind here is Napa Valley produces only about 4% of the wine from the state of California.
All right, yeah.
So that's pretty interesting too, that there's an apparent popularity of Cabernet, but some big portion of that is also name rather than simple volume. It is one of the most planted varieties, but again, everybody talks about Napa Valley Cabernet, yet it's only 4% of the state. So it's an interesting sort of tension there, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I've I was trying to figure out why Cabernet's been so successful. It just seems to be a great traveler. Some varieties travel badly. Napa, the Cabernet seems to cross the world and do reasonably well wherever it's grown.
Yeah, I mean, I think its ability to adapt in different growing conditions is certainly a big part of its popularity. Something can't be popular unless it can be available, right? And so there's Cabernet literally all over the world, and it does reasonably well anywhere, and it can handle a massive range of styles too, I
had a good question from Brad, Winetime London. He wants to know where we think the most exciting Cabernet is coming from now.
It's a very political question.
Is that too difficult for you to answer?
No, we can answer it. I think some of the, we often with wine media especially tend to think of exciting as meaning new.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to mean new, right? It just has to mean that there's a strength to it. And actually, like, one of the things I was thinking about coming into this was, there's a wine out of Chile, Neyen, has what is probably the oldest Cabernet in the world. It was planted 1880s, 1890s, own-rooted. Cuttings came directly from Bordeaux and then were established in Chile. And, I've been lucky enough to walk that vineyard. It's being farmed organically. They're converting to biodynamics. Like, that's really exciting. It's exciting because it's unexpected. The vines are healthy and at that age, it's really this genetic resource, to cut, a genetic heritage that's from before phylloxera hit Europe. That's pretty incredible, So I don't know if they are literally the oldest Cabernet vines in the world, but they're certainly among the oldest, and it's certainly among the oldest genetic material as well. So
it's interesting because Cabernet is actually a reasonably young grape variety as far as grape varieties go. I think it was in '96 that it was Carol Meredith and I think John Bowers was working with her then. Yeah, and they discovered the parentage of Cabernet Sauvignon, which was Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc.
Well, and isn't it funny, 96 is also the year of the great replant to Cabernet? Coincidence, but anyway.
So that I think that the view is that this was an accidental cross happened at some stage in the 17th or 18th century, which is like, some varieties are a lot older than that. But it just seems an interesting variety. When you see it in the vineyard, what strikes me is, first of all, it's one of the easiest to spot because of the deep, the way the leaves look. It looks
really
like
gorgeous leaves,
and they seem to be they're quite thick leaves as well, and they're kind of disease resistant, which I think is one good thing. But then you look at the bunch architecture. I think this is one of the keys to Cabernet. It's like some bunches, like Pinot Noir, all the grapes are very cramped in there together, and they're just waiting to explode with botrytis. Whereas Cabernet, there's smaller berries, and there's just lots of space in the bunch.
Yeah, there's just more space. Yeah,
and the smaller berries, often the result of that is when you extract, you get more concentration, you get more tannins. It seems to be that could be one of the reasons why it's so successful, because it's easier to grow and get good quality fruit from.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, the importance of it being something that can grow in so many places and being disease resistant, at least in terms of rot. It can get wood diseases, which I think prevents it from getting as old as something like Zinfandel, but it's decently hardy vine, decently hardy fruit, and that goes a
But
long way.
interestingly, Cabernet hates stress. I didn't realize. I was just checking some of my notes from an Australian tutorial session back in 2009, and there was a session on Cabernet, and the winemaker Rob Mann was from Western Australia, Cape and Tal, and he was saying that Cabernet just really hates stress. And it's a bit like Sauvignon in that respect. It doesn't like stress. Any water stress just shuts down, goes into blockage. And I think that's one of the reasons why sometimes varietal Cabernet has this mid-palate hole, which is why I think in many regions, Cabernet is blended, because there's something in that mid-palate. Cabernet Franc doesn't have a mid-palate hole. Merlot often fills that mid-palate hole. And in Australia, the classic blend was Cabernet Shiraz, and where the Shiraz was filling the mid-palate hole of the Cabernet, which was kind of given the bookends, the structure of the fruit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, and coming back to California, Coruscant is a great example of someone that's able to do 100% varietal Cabernet. And she actually even is able to do it in single vineyard versions. But her main wine, the Napa Valley Coruscant, is a site blend. And Steve Mathiasen, he's another example. He makes the comment, Cabernet is a blending grape. It's actually a rare thing to have a single vineyard Cabernet that does very well. And the reason Coruscant established her brand as Cabernet only is because she feels St. Helena, this, one little pocket of Napa Valley, it has the warmth and the soil conditions in the right places to create a full-bodied Cabernet that's not huge, but has that mid palate like you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm drinking some wine at the moment, which is actually a blend. I think it's a Cabernet-dominated blend. It's from Hedges, and we've got Sarah coming on later, she made this wine.
I'm excited to see what she has to say. She does such interesting work with Cabernet and across a range of styles.
Yeah. And so this is from Red Mountain. It's one of the Grand Cru sites of Washington State, and it's 2013 vintage. And I'd like to ask her actually later, because it's interesting. I noticed the oak use on this. This is like 65% American oak and 35% French, which, because I maybe it's just my bias, but often when it comes to high-end wines like this, you think American. It's like...
although Ridge famously created their Bordeaux blend, Cabernet dominant as well, with American oak. Well, so I'm actually drinking Hedges as well. My lighting is a little different, so it's harder to see my label, but it's actually their Cabernet. It's bottled as Cabernet, though it is a blend. So this is 76% Cabernet, and it's a 2016 vintage. But one of the things I think that's interesting, though, and it says a lot about the kind of freedom of the New World, but also the kind of exploratory character of Washington wine. There's a little bit of Syrah in this, and you mentioned Australia, of course, has a tradition with Shiraz and Cabernet, but it's not super common to have that. This is a traditional Bordeaux blend, but with a little bit of Syrah, 5%, I think, in this one.
Yeah.
So I'll be excited to see what she has to say about the work that she's doing and how she sees Cabernet there.
This, I noticed on the back label, the pH is 3.9, so it's high pH, which is like, it's high
which
pH.
Which is exciting, though, because it's so bright, still, there's a kind of approachability, and yet there's still a brightness. So it's pretty amazing they're getting that with that pH.
Yeah. And I think what I like about this is what I often get in Cabernet is, and Bordeaux style blends, is this sort of gravelly, savoury character. So it's almost like a structural thing, as much as anything else. You've got the presentation of the fruit. So there's just got a kind of core of blackcurrant fruit, then a little bit of red fruit freshness as well. But then underneath that, there's these layers of what I can best describe as gravelly. It's a way that it feels in the mouth. And
well, I think it gets at actually an interesting subject I know that you and I have talked about before, but also says a lot about the nature of Cabernet. And, we were saying Cabernet is incredibly flexible in terms of where it can grow and the range of styles it can appear in. But at the same time, like really high-end Cabernet tends to be grown in these kinds of gravelly soils. And that also relates to the vine vigor and pyrazines. I know I was talking to I spent a lot of time talking to people that are really focused on farming and also making the wine here in California. And one of the things that we've discovered through studies is that the pyrazine nature of Cabernet, it is elevated across all Bordeaux varieties, but that it also, to the extent to which it shows up in a wine, relates to the vigor of the vines. We used to talk about it simply in terms of light exposure, but more recent studies have found that actually it relates to vine vigor. So if you have a really vigorous vine and pull its leaves, you'll still have a lot of pyrazines. And I think it's an interesting character to consider. Some people have tried to get away from pyrazines, but I know you and I have talked about there's advantages to it. And I think with this Hedges, the one that I'm having from 16, one of the things that I appreciate about it is that there's just a hint of that pyrazine element, and it brings a freshness to it. But it wouldn't occur to me to describe it as a pyrazine wine at the same time.
Yeah, I think personally that the greenness at some level is an intrinsic character of Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. And that if you try and ripen it out, you'll end up with an overripe wine. But when it's done well and you get this slight, especially with a slightly older wine, you get this leafy green framing that I think is beautiful.
Yeah, as an accent.
Works well. Yeah,
yeah.
An accent. That's a good term. Yeah,
I think if you think of it as an accent, that it really can show some of the nobility of a site and of the wine. But I think it also, when you have excess pyrazine, it tends to correlate with that missing mid palate that you were talking about too. Because I think it represents. The other side of pyrazine is that it can represent an imbalance in the vine, that there's too much canopy for the fruit. And so you end up having this green note. One of the other things, going back to the Nayen, Carmenere, of course, is also a Bordeaux variety, but we've sort of forgotten about it because it's not in Bordeaux anymore. But of course, we rediscovered it in Chile. And one of the things that they've discovered in their work in Chile is that you end up with a ton of pyrazines in young Carmenere, but as the vines get older, their vigor also goes down and the pyrazines wane. So as you have it correlates with vine age, but it actually seems to be related to vigor. And so as you have less vigor on a vine, you still have a pyrazine element, because it is native to the grape, like you're saying, but it's not dominating anymore. You have a balance of the richness and the greenness at the same time.
Yeah, so for those who are just joining, just to recap, I'm chatting with Elaine Brown, and I'm on the SipGlocal handle, and this is episode 2 of the Wine Zones, which is part of the SipGlocal initiative. So do check out SipGlocal later. We're talking Cabernet Sauvignon, and there's a couple of interesting questions. One, Alaskan winemaker wants to know what we think the most underrated Cabernet Sauvignon wine region is.
Well, I gotta say, I need to know if Alaskan winemaker is really from Alaska. So in case anyone doesn't know, I am from Alaska, born and raised. My daughter and I are the only ones not still there. And so the idea that there's an Alaskan winemaker watching right now is pretty awesome. So the question, most underrated Cabernet region?
Yeah.
You and I, Jamie, you and I have been lucky enough to travel Gimlet Gravels together in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. And I think it's a really interesting region to keep an eye on, because I think there's the vine age is now there, and the experience is now there, and the commitment is now there. And so I think now is the time to really be watching Gimlet Gravels in New Zealand and Hawke's Bay, because the wines are really starting to come online, and we're starting to see some really pretty good Bordeaux blends there, and Cabernet based wines.
I'd say Bridge Par as well in Hawke's Bay as
absolutely.
well. There's some really interesting things there. The Gravels are very famous and they're great. That's a good call actually.
So Hawke's Bay more broadly, I think would be the way.
Washington State, I'd say Washington State's a bit underrated, because I've tried some of the fantastic wines. It's like Red
Mountain makes such great wines, and Walla Walla, there's some really good Cabernet coming out of Walla Walla too.
Yes, there's amazing wines.
Yeah.
I think we forget a little bit about some of the Australian regions as well. So I know Coonawarra was very, very famous a long time ago, and people have sort of forgotten about it a bit. And Margaret River as well can produce some astonishing Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh my God, such beautiful wines there. And talk about freshness too. Cabernet from Margaret River,
Yeah. And another question I thought was good is, from Airplane, is there a region that does a good job of managing green notes without over ripening? And this is interesting because I think managing the green notes, I think part of it, as you say, is about the age of the vine, the management of the vine.
Yeah.
But also regionally, I think sometimes in warmer climates, managing green notes can be quite hard. It's almost like you get less of a margin for error. With Bordeaux, you've got a wide margin for error, you know?
Yeah, well, one of the things I was reading up about this earlier because I was really thinking about the pyrazine vigor thing, not to overemphasize it, but one of the things I was reading earlier was that actually the funny thing is that in warm climates you can end up exactly with that problem, the crazy dichotomy of in warm climates you can get too much vigor, so you can have this like too much pyrazine, or then it can go the other way where you get overripe so quickly, like you're saying, and so it's really hard to strike that balance. And that's when it comes down to this quality of the site, you know, that it's hard to answer the question regionally. I think it ends up coming down to producer and how fine-tuned the farming is, because that's really very much a site and farming question, actually, I think. Yeah.
Christy Frank Wine, very good comment there. The Yarra Valley flies under the radar. Well, I think that's a really good point, because two of my favorite wines from Australia, Yarra Yering #1, which is Cabernet-based blend.
And those
and
wines
also Mount Mary. Mount Mary as well. It's like insanely good. And I went there, I was in the Yarra, and I went there, and one of my favorite things was Robert Parker had just reviewed the Mount Mary wines and trashed them, given them like scores in the 70s. And these are like, I think, some of Australia's finest, most age-worthy wines. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
And they proudly put his reviews on top of the barrels in the tasting room, which I thought was kind of fun, you know.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is,
they're totally iconic. They're iconic, but like you said, they're somehow iconic and under the radar at the same time, because those wines can age forever. You know, I had one just 2 years ago from the early 90s, Yarra Yering from the early 90s, that was just in that like beautiful, delicate meat reduction sort of state, you know, and it still had a sense of fresh acid and just a hint of greenness that provided the frame, like you said, you know.
So yeah, one of the things I was thinking about is, you know, I was trying to think, what are some of my favorite Cabernet Sauvignons? And so I've got a little short list here. I'm sure you've got a list as well of things, but I'll just fire it out. So I'm discounting Bordeaux because I guess in Bordeaux, there's certainly when you get to Santa Steph, then you've got quite a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon there. But obviously Bordeaux, well, let's leave that for now. But aside from Bordeaux, I think one of the two of my Napa favorites I'd have put on my list. One is Marcamus, and the other is Carlson.
Yeah.
Which I think, this is a region you know much better than I do, but I just really appreciate the restraint and balance and age-worthiness of these wines.
The other one I would mention too is Smith Madrone, you know, which is an example of mountain Cabernet. As soon as we, you know, the other thing to remember about California and Cabernet is California actually introduced mountain Cabernet to the world. There are individual sites around the world that grow Cabernet at elevation, but mountain Cabernet as a category didn't appear until young guys in the 70s pushed their way up the slopes because they couldn't get valley floor land, you know, and you know, Philippe Togny is one of the most gorgeous, age-worthy Cabernets out there. Unbelievable how beautiful it gets with age, but it's hard to find Cabernet with value these days. And the truth is, the winery that has consistently delivered incredible Cabernet at a really good price is Smith Madrone, and I think that deserves to be mentioned. I mean, I think it still retails at not even $50, you know, which is kind of mind-boggling. Yeah.
So I'd also add, and so in Australia, there's a few. I mean, Margaret Mosswood has been a favourite of mine.
Absolutely,
also, Coonawarra, Parker Coonawarra Estate, some of their stuff is like crackingly good. And also the shout out for Wynn's Black Label Cabernet Sauvignon. It's really affordable and ages beautifully. And what's interesting, we talk about greenness, but in Australia, what you've got in Cabernet Sauvignon is often you've got a hint of eucalypt.
Oh,
And
yeah, right, yeah.
the eucalypt adds the cineole is the aromatic compound in eucalypt. And I think the cineole kind of gives a minty green freshness that I think
Mm-hmm.
works really well
Mm-hmm.
in terms of Cabernet Sauvignon. It's an acquired taste and it can be too much, but I think it's really cool. So then Washington State, I've got three names down here that have really impressed me. First of all, L'Ecole 41, the Ferguson Vineyard.
Oh, yeah.
This is a super insanely good wine.
What an incredible
And
wine.
what's
And it's a
interesting about that, I
mind-boggling
went to see the
vineyard.
vineyard. I went to see the vineyard
Yeah,
because
it's
because
incredible.
it's at 1,400 feet. It's above all the level of the slap water deposits of the
No, but it's all basalt, you
So
know.
it's just the basalt. It's basaltic with
Barely
a little
any
bit of loess
topsoil.
on the top.
Yeah.
And for me, that wine is one of the finest Cabernets I've tried.
Yeah, and you need to allow age on that wine for sure. You know, it's just meant to age forever. That one, it's a pretty remarkable wine.
Also, for hedges, I wanted to mention their Haute Cuvée, which is like one of the first biodynamic Cabernets from Washington.
Yeah.
Red Mountain wine, super, super cool Cabernet Sauvignon. Really.
Well, the thing I love about hedges is like they're so classic, and they really maintain their line. Like, you know, you're going to get a solid, gorgeous wine from hedges, and yet at the same time, they're still like trying new things out, and like you said, doing biodynamic practices and making Cabernet that is coming from that. But also, you know, when you talk to Sarah later, she'll probably mention they've been doing experiments in the cellar, like small lot side experiments, seeing how different maceration times affect it.
Yeah.
You know, what does whole cluster do? And anybody doing whole cluster on Cabernet, you know, it's almost unheard of. There's a few people doing it, but very little. And just that kind of openness to keep experimenting, I really admire a lot.
And the other one that I put down was Kilseda. How do you say it? Do you say, I should know, Kilseda Creek?
Casita Creek, yeah.
Casita,
Yeah.
you just say Casita.
Yeah, that's what I would say, but I'll admit it's one of those words I always see written rather than hear said.
Yes.
So
I've never actually pronounced it. I've never actually spoken it out in real life before. And it's I'm scared stiff of mispronunciations. It's like I should have checked before, but it's like, some of those wines I've been super impressed by. Really,
yeah, absolutely.
Very fine wines. But the other thing I would say about Washington State, which has impressed me, is that you can actually buy really good, smashable, good quality Cabernet Sauvignon at a very affordable price. Kilseda.
Yeah, Kilseda.
Thank you, Red Mountain Beowulf. Kilseda.
Thank you.
Kilseda Creek.
No, I honestly.
This is the Washington State strength, is that you've got the fancy high-end stuff, but then you can actually buy really solid wines at a weeknight drinking level, which I think is a really cool thing.
I think Washington is under regarded in that sense, in that Washington pretty consistently over delivers, you know, so the quality of the wine you can find there really outmatches its price and other wines at its price. But that's also an advantage of turning to lesser talked about regions, right? Like, so Napa Valley makes some smashing good Cabernet. There's a reason why that's so well known. And you can actually find wines of value, like we've mentioned. But then, on the other hand, if you go to regions that are less talked about, it's easier to find wines that are affordable and, like you said, weeknight drinking. Although I think for some of us in the current situation, it's hard to know which is a weeknight and which is not. You know, I had to keep reminding myself.
My productivity's gone down massively. I was like,
oh my God,
I was sick for 2 weeks. I had the
know.
virus, and then I kind of came round, and I just got used to lying in bed, and I actually think bed is quite nice. So like every day, it's like if I feel a bit like lethargic, I'll go and write in bed for a little bit, and then I have a little snooze.
It's actually, for me, it's been a matter of concentration has been hard. You know,
I can't concentrate. My writing level. I mean, that's why I like things like this, because it's immediate, and it's like. But actually sitting down to write, and I've got 2 books to write. It's been really tough. Yeah.
Well, and no, I totally agree that it's kind of a relief to get to have these conversations, but also it's a relief to see you, because I knew you were sick, and so I'm glad you're doing well.
Thank you.
You know? Yeah.
So what were we talking about? We were talking about favorite wines. Yeah. So that's kind of my list of favorites, and I think Look, Cabernet is not the most fashionable variety. You know, amongst my geeky hospo friends, we rarely pull a Cabernet out. But when it's good, it's really good.
You know what else? Very, very few people make rosé from Cabernet, but it can be unbelievably wonderful because, you know, the herbal elements, not just green, but a range of herbal elements that you get naturally from Cabernet. In a rosé, it can be so lovely, you know, because you end up with this like savory herbal freshness in a rosé model, and it's so drinkable and such a good food wine. But it's hard to. There's only a few people that make those really, and yeah. But with rosé becoming more popular, I'm hoping that more people will start experimenting with that.
Yeah. So I think it's almost time to introduce Sarah to the conversation.
I want to get Sarah on here. I'm excited.
The weakness of this format is we have you can only have two people, which I think is a shame. It would be nice to have a three-way conversation.
Yeah, but I'm excited to hear what she has to say, and and it's nice she'll be able to comment on the wines you and I have been drinking too.
And what do you think I should ask her, just from your perspective?
Well, I mean, for one thing, just the simple thing is just to go ahead and tell us about the Cabernet Sauvignon versus the red blend. You know, what's the inspiration for one versus the other? Those are the two wines you and I are drinking. But be sure to get her to talk about the biodynamic Cabernet and also some of the cellar experiments they're doing. You know, since you and I have mentioned those, it'd be great to get the actual insight from her on those things. Yeah. Well,
Elaine, it's been a massive pleasure to connect with you like this.
Thanks so much for asking me to do this.
No, it's always a good conversation, and I learn a lot from listening to you and chatting with you. And I hope that at some stage we get to meet somewhere around the globe and maybe take part in a panel together again.
I hope so too. Yeah. And everybody remember, support your local businesses. Find your favorites and do what you can to support them. If you're in a place that is offering, food to go or wine to go, or, a lot of wineries have amazing deals right now. And it's not about discounts. It's, there's a lot of wineries offering things like send a box to your friend, so you can order one for yourself, one for your friend, and that way you guys can drink together separately. Look for things like that inspire you, and support your local businesses, because we want them there for us when things change again. So Jamie, thank you so much. I'm really grateful to get to talk with you and to be here with everybody. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Sarah has to say too.
Yeah, cool. Let's connect again
thanks.
soon. Yeah?
Okay,
cool.
Thanks. Bye.
It always feels kind of brutal when you kind of kick someone off one of these conversations. It was great to chat with Elaine, and hopefully Sarah will pop up soon in my feed with a request to join, and then I'll let her in. So it's so good to see so many really nice comments about Elaine, because she's really one of the great talents of the wine communication world, and it's a privilege to have her on today. So, Sarah, are you there? Yes. Oh, Hedges Wine has sent a request to be in my live video. Go live with Hedges Wine. I think she's going to be here very soon. While I'm waiting for... Oh, there you are. Fantastic. Hey, Sarah.
Oh, God. I hope our internet is not crazy.
No, you're here. I can hear you.
Hey, Jamie.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm about halfway through the 2013. Can you tell me a bit about it?
13 was actually a really fun vintage. 12 was kind of like our average nice year in Washington State, and 13 came in right after that, and I felt like it was just kind of a notch above 12 as far as flavors go, especially for Cabernet, since we're talking about Cabernet today. So this was a couple years before I became head winemaker. So it was really at that point where Pete told me he was going to retire, and
Is Pete your uncle?
He's my uncle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and I got to work with him for 10 years. And when he, he actually taught me more than I thought he did. And when he told me he was going to retire, I got really stressed out and started paying attention a lot more. But I think that the 13 vintage was really kind of a breakthrough for me, because that's when I actually knew that I was going to do this job.
that's really cool. So just for the benefit of the readers who aren't familiar with hedges, tell us a little bit about yourselves, because you're like the kings of Red Mountain, which is like a Grand Cru sort of AVA in Washington State, yeah?
So the hedges story is very funny. My mom is from Champagne, France, and my dad is from Tri-Cities, about 20 miles from the AVA. And the Hedges family has actually been in Washington State since the 1800s. We were wheat farmers and then apple farmers, and then my grandparents moved to the Tri-Cities to, my grandfather was an engineer, and so my dad grew up here. He wanted to get out of here as fast as possible. Tri-Cities back then was a growing area, and so he ended up traveling the world and met my mom down in Mexico. And from there, they traveled the world some more. I was born in Argentina, and my dad was in produce sales. And eventually, my mom, they kind of decided to start this wine business. And wine export was their specialty in the beginning. And then my dad ended up coming back home to plant vineyards on Red Mountain.
Yeah. And so Red Mountain, tell me a little bit about Red Mountain. Special place for growing, well, Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon, yeah?
Yeah, special place. We get very little rainfall here. We're sort of at the end of this valley. We're kind of in the sort of the in between the Yakima and the Columbia Valley. So we get this wind that comes through. We're very hot, very little rainfall, about 6 inches of rain a year, which is very slight. And you were talking about earlier when, Cabernet does not like water stress, does not like heat stress. But for some reason, it grows really well here, as does Syrah. So it's very interesting to have both of those grapes in this climate. And we also have soils that are very devoid of, or very void of organic matter. So there's little water holding capacity. So any water that you actually can get into your soil is half of it's already drained out before the grapes can take it up. So it's very stressful climate for grapes.
And so how do you farm? Do you try to get organic material in the soil? Is that a goal, or is it okay the way it is?
We've actually been putting on compost since about 96, 97. We tried everything in the early days to get the water to hold in the soil. And actually the first year at one of our vineyards with Syrah, the leaves dropped off in August. And we realized we ended up harvesting that year. The leaves came back in September. When it wasn't so hot, but we knew that we needed to add some organic matter. And, that was sort of our transition a long time ago into biodynamics, was we need to create an atmosphere that's a little bit better for these vines to not stress out so much and get them to really thrive. And so that's what biodynamics has done for us.
So you're making Syrah, you're making Cabernet Sauvignon or Bordeaux blends, with a high proportion of Cabernet Sauvignon. Are they very different to deal with?
Yeah. Syrah is one of those grapes where I think that the winemaker's pick decision is so much more important. It's very but you're breaking open the berries a little bit less than if you were to run them through the crusher destemmer. So you're getting a different character out of it. I think it gives you a little bit brighter fruit, actually, paired with that rusticness, and those seem to go well together.
And oak use, I noticed on this wine, the 2013, there's predominant American oak.
Yeah.
Is that still something you're doing, or are you experimenting with alternative élevage, larger oak, or?
Typically, we're about 60% American oak. Hedges has always liked to be a little bit lighter on the oak since we want to highlight fruit. I love oak in the fact that it is supposed to accentuate your wine, not overtake your wine. I do like French oak for certain things and longer aging wines. But American oak, I think, pairs well with Red Mountain Cab, especially because we have this sort of Christmas spice character. And I think the spice from the American oak really, they work so nicely together. Some American oak can be a little overpowering. I do get it sort of a medium plus, almost heavier toast because I like more of that smoky character. I don't like the kind of lighter toasted kind of coconut oil that you can get from American oak. So we try to make it work with our wines instead of just covering it up.
And SipGlocal, what does that mean to you? Have you had involvement with it and, your local community?
Yeah, so I kind of had followed it. I saw it on Instagram a couple weeks ago, and it's a fairly new thing. I think what's interesting in this time right now is that we're separated physically from each other, but I have seen more community online than I ever have, and especially with restaurants and wineries, and there seems to just be this more of a sense of community now that I didn't see before. And even if you're at your house and working from home, everyone just seems to be coming together in a way that they hadn't come together before. So, and I really do respect our local restaurants and wineries that, there was a problem and they all came up with the solution, and they've worked really hard to do takeout meals. And like Elaine was saying with the first responders, a lot of our local restaurants are doing meals for Boys and Girls Club, who are taking care of kids for first responders. And I'm just seeing so much community happening. And so even though it's a bad thing for the world, I think people are sort of seeing life in a new light, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. And just one final question. Boo Walker's, obviously, Boo, who works for you, has written a novel called Red Mountain.
Yeah.
Is it based on real life?
I'm not going to say which characters are who, but if you know my family well and the characters of Red Mountain, you can kind of see hints of everybody in a lot of his characters. But he really took what Red Mountain is and turned it into just this amazing story that we see every day when we're living here and working here. And I really enjoyed reading those books. I thought they were a lot of fun, and I'm about to start his third one, so I'm really excited.
He's written 3. Whoa.
Yeah, so Red Mountain Burning is the new one. And so there's Red Mountain, and then what's the other one? Red Mountain Rising, and now Red Mountain Burning. So actually,
that's great.
Check it out, and I definitely recommend them. If you've never traveled to Red Mountain, maybe buy some wine from Red Mountain and read the book, and you'll really just feel like you're in the space. It's pretty cool.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much. It's been really brilliant to chat with you, and it feels like we could have gone on a lot longer, which is always a good sign. And I hope when this travel ban and when the world gets back to normal again, that I'll be back in your neck of the woods at some stage. I'd love to come back and see what you're doing.
We would love to have you back here. And it's nice to see you again. It's been a long time.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great. I'm going to do the brutal thing and touch the cross in the corner, which will cut you off. But thank you so much. So it's been a really fascinating session. We're kind of like close to the end now. It's been really fantastic to chat with both Elaine and Sarah, who have got so much good stuff to say. Just a quick reminder that if you get a chance, check out SipGlocal. That's SipGlocal. And Glocal is actually a word. Google it on an online dictionary, you'll find it. But guys, it's been fantastic to share this time. We'll be back again next week for episode 3 of Wine Zones. And very soon we'll reveal what we'll be covering then. But it's been a really cool session. Thank you so much.